So we're now at the bewitching hour at 8 o'clock. And as you know, we start on time here. So I just want to introduce myself. I did want to let everybody know this is being recorded and we will upload it at a different time. So I just wanted to let you folks know that. So my name is Darcy McCann. I'm the director of the Northeast Kingdom Chamber of Commerce. We've been doing these legislative breakfasts for a long time and can't even call them a breakfast now. We have to call them a forum. And this is the first time we're doing it on Zoom, so we're going to do the best we can. We're going to do this for the next hour and have the legislators speak, and then questions and answers at the end, depending on the time that we have. As you can probably see, my name is Darcy McCann, but you'll all see Laurel Ruggles listed as Darcy McCann too. We're here at our Northeast Kingdom Chamber new office up in Linden Center, and she's up in the other room, and she is one of our co-hosts. Due to sort of the nature of the technology of these online forums, I asked Laurel, who's newly retired from Northeastern Vermont Regional Hospital, to take on co-hosting duties with me. And we'd like to thank Gretchen Hammer, who's been our longtime moderator, who we hope is going to be watching or listening to this at home at some point. So we thank her so much. She's been an amazing person with these forums and additionally a great mentor. So this being a new format for us, I just wanted to lay out a little bit of some of the sort of rules and housekeeping items before we start. Our legislators will be spotlighted during most of the meeting, or participants will be non-video appearing guests. We've done that so we can feature our legislators all the time throughout the whole entire meeting. Please mute yourself if you've not already, and then when Laurel asks you to call, you can unmute yourself. We want to encourage a really frank and candid discussion with our legislators, but we do want to have a couple points we want to make here. This forum is a chance to really ask your legislators the issues that are near and dear to your hearts, but also let them do committee reports. So, what we have said in the past, and I've been quite clear about it, we don't want people grandstanding, but we want to be respectful and allow people the opportunity to speak with their legislators, but to ask their questions. And then if you could then mute yourselves, then the legislators will be able to speak. We normally have the legislators speaking for the first half and questions and answers at the end, and we plan to do that here. A question we always get, and we do this at the beginning of these legislative forums, is these are our legislators, our standing legislators now, and we don't allow campaign discussions to get into this. These are, as he said, our legislators who are over in Montpelier, and that discussion does not come up political races and whatnot. Our legislators all know that, but we need our audience to know that as well. So regardless of what's going on and races going on, that those discussions don't end up here. I'm also very proud of our legislators, Republican and Democratic, representing both parties, is that they really work so well together over in Montpelier. And so there's not partisanship when we come to these forums, that people are honestly working with each other all the time. And we're going to have these discussions, and we ask that of our audience too. As I said, this session will be recorded. We'll be posting links on this recording at a later time as it uploads to the cloud, and we'll let people how they can access. Kingdom Access Television plans to air these meetings as well. So I think what I'm going to do right now is bring Laurel Ruggles to the forefront, and she'll describe some of the other rules and get the legislators going. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is our first legislative update of 2022, and we hope that we have at least 4 more sessions. Probably February will be by Zoom again, and then hopefully it'll be safe for everyone to get together and be in all one room in March. So before we hear from our legislators, for anyone else in the audience, the best way to ask a question today is to put it in the chat. And then when we get to the end, after we've heard updates from all the legislators, Darcy and I will go back through and try to ask the questions in the chat in the order that we receive them. So that's the best way to ask a question. So has been our convention here. We have started with our senators. And today we have Jane and Joe with us. And so we'll start with Jane and then Joe. And then we'll go in alphabetical order with our representatives, alphabetical by last name. And I think you can see yourselves there, but I will also put it in the chat, the alphabetical order that I have, and I will cue you up. And we've got time for everyone to have about 4 minutes today. And I'll keep track of the time and kind of give you a signal when it's when your 4 minutes is almost up. So Jane, can you start us off?
Certainly. Thank you, Laurel. Good morning, everyone out there. It seems like our world of Zoom has become the norm. The Senate has actually been meeting remotely since March 13th of 2020. So it's quite amazing the amount of work we have done using technology. I'm on the chair of the budget committee, the appropriations committee, and I also serve on transportation. So a lot of the federal legislation has directly impacted our world. And it's impacted our world in several areas. One, of course, is the money that we have to appropriate and to support some of our long-term goals that simply because of the funding requirements have been eluding us. The other is on the revenue side. And the federal legislation and with the funding that's come through, Vermont has received about $10 billion. And that from those federal revenue sources that have been flowing through our economy. And needless to say, that's influenced our income and our tax revenue, income tax and other tax revenues, such as consumption taxes. On the other hand, juxtaposed to that, we have data that tells us that more families are in need of housing or in homeless or need of food assistance. So we have this juxtaposition of a lot of money in one place and still a widening gap. The caution for those of us, and I see Representative Feltus is on, and that is these revenues are really not long lasting. And we are getting requests from everywhere imaginable for funding. And we have to be careful that we are not overspending our base because the economists are telling us 18 months out from now, it looks like our revenues would grow about 2%. So once again, I'm going to say it's all about the base. And we cannot commit to ongoing expenditures that would exceed our capacity, our ongoing base capacity to support them. On the other hand, one-time funding really allows us to make huge investments in housing, and the budget adjustment that we're working on right now and that's come out of the House actually has 75 million more in housing. So, and broadband, of course, was a major appropriation in the big bill, and then water quality, and the other, which I'm, as legislators, we can take great pride in, and that is the package of workforce development that we passed in the bill. Last year, it was a result of the budget process that we did so much to support higher education, our workforce, and our human capital. And so that, to me, is an investment for the future, similar to what I think of as the GI Bill. So that's the challenge, is to make sure that we are committing dollars in a way that match whether they're going to be ongoing or whether they're one time. The other, and tying into the base, and that's tax proposals. Everybody likes to have a tax proposal that would benefit them, but either the base has to accommodate them, or services or are reduced or impacted, or someone else is going to pay in a different way. Workforce has been a horrible challenge, and it's not unique to state government. It is so pervasive. Municipal government is struggling, but healthcare, social services, childcare, and the list goes on. So the legislature is putting in more money to help stabilize our provider system, our healthcare provider system, and $60 million to help with recruitment and retention of workers, which are all over the place, whether we're talking about our nursing homes, our mental health agencies, and then, of course, childcare is right top of the list. I've had the pleasure of being assigned to work on pensions, and we have put together a package that recognizes for the first time that we have healthcare benefits for teachers and state employees when they retire, and we never pre-funded them. That has created a huge obligation on the state's bottom line of over $2 billion. And we have a retirement retirement package that's coming through the Senate to go to the House that will address pension underfunding as well as deal with pre-funding and the ongoing funding of our healthcare benefits for these employees when they retire, which is really key to economic security as in retirement times. On the transportation, the federal infrastructure bill is really making a lot more money available, but the state has to come up with a match for it. So this year, for example, paving is this coming 23, paving will be almost 160 million. That compares to, maybe 100 million in the past. So you're going to see a lot of benefit with the funds that are flowing. The challenge is going to be workforce, supply chain, and cost. And so those are all the things that we are working on as it relates to both transportation and putting together a budget adjustment, which normally is pretty technical and just truing up expenditures and relative to our estimates. But this year it's quite a bit larger because we're putting in money to get more work started, particularly in the housing arena. So with that, I'm going to stop, and I guess it would go to Senator Benning.
Thank you, Jane. Yeah, Joe, you're up.
Thank you, Laurel. Thank you, Jane. Good morning, everybody. First, let me say again, it is an honor and a privilege to have served in this role. You may have heard that I'm not running for this again, and I want to take a brief moment just to say I've been extremely thankful for the opportunity to have served. I hope I've done the best I can, and folks appreciate what work I have done. Presently, I am the chair of Senate Institutions, which is the committee that oversees all the state's brick and mortar. We'll talk a little bit more about what's going on in that committee in a moment. I also serve on Senate Judiciary, which has a lot of bills that are currently floating, many of which are very controversial, but I just want to talk about one, and that is qualified immunity for police officers. We are in the midst of a culture change, if you will, with the entire nation looking at how police interact with the public. And at this point in time, the Senate has a bill in front of it that would eliminate what is known as qualified immunity for police officers, which basically says if a police officer has done something that is beyond the scope of their duties and interfered with somebody's civil rights, that they are protected, which is the current law right now. They are protected from personal suit because of what's known as qualified immunity. There is a movement afoot to have that removed. As a defense attorney, I am somewhat sympathetic to that cause, and I've probably cross-examined more police officers through 38 years now of practicing law, and I know that police officers make mistakes. But at this point in time, with what's going on around the country, with the fact that your legislators remain on Zoom, which is not a forum that produces our best work, quite frankly, at least in my opinion, I am very reluctant to get involved in the details of this bill at this time. There is such a thing as good legislation. There is such a thing as doing good legislation at the proper moment in time. I just do not like the optics of where we are right now. So my inclination is to vote no on this bill. I know that's going to disappoint people, but the upshot is I don't believe we are in a position right now with all of the things that are going on around us to try to do something of that magnitude at this point in time. I'm going to shift, and by the way, I'll answer any questions that you may have about what's going on in the Judiciary Committee, as well as what's going on in institutions. So shifting over to institutions, I have worked all summer and fall with a group of people on a joint committee known as the State House Advisory Committee, and we have been trying to figure out how to reopen the State House. The State House, if you have been in there recently, it's a rare event for people who do, but if you go in, I like to think of the present Senate chamber as looking like the flight deck of the Starship Enterprise. There are television screens all throughout the room. It looks horrible, and it is something that I want to get rid of as soon as possible. But in order to do that, we have to get through the COVID process. Every committee room has now been redesigned. They have their own televisions. They have their own little screen on the middle of the table that takes a universal shot of the room so that we can continue the Zoom process. I very much think we are going to have Zoom in our lives forever, but getting the public back into the building is very important to me, and we're trying to figure out how to do that right. One of the things we've been talking about is how to expand the building. I know people think politicians, they just want all that they need to have and want, but the bottom line is pre-COVID, we were overgrowing that building. There are far too many people jammed into too small a space. And way back in the 1980s, there was a plan afoot to put a floor on top of the present cafeteria in order to expand. Right now, the institutions committees are looking at that as a possibility. We now have some federal money floating around. It may help us get through that process, but we will try to do what we can to spend the money wisely, frugally, but make sure that the people's house is accommodating the people it's supposed to serve. I'll close with a little bit about the Woodside facility that had closed. Woodside was a facility for juveniles who are in need of either incarceration, frankly, or serious mental health services. And that building closed due to it being obsolete. We are trying to figure out how to do a whole new approach towards juveniles who are at-risk youth. And the town of Newbury has been deeply involved in that conversation. I'm tending to believe that Newbury facility is not the place to go, so I'm urging the folks that are in the discussion to try to come up with Plan B so that we can move forward and accommodate at-risk youth. Again, thank you very much for the opportunity, and I hope I've finished within my 4 minutes.
Thanks, Joe. So Scott Beck, you're up next, and then Scott Campbell, you're on deck.
Thank you, Darcy. I'm Scott Beck. I serve on House Ways and Means Committee. Hit a phone call there. Serve on the House Ways and Means Committee, and we're looking at two things I think this year that are pretty important. One is, the first is that spinning off of the fiscal report that Jane gave, we have up to $140 million in tax cuts that we could give this year, depending on how you look at the Ed Fund and General Fund. And we're looking closely at that to see how much of that is appropriate to give back to taxpayers and which taxpayers should receive that money. So that's an ongoing conversation. We're also spending a lot of time on the education fund. As you know, there was a task force that met over the summer. I was on that task force. I don't want to go into great detail. Maybe during questions we can, but that task force report would be phenomenally good for all of the Northeast Kingdom, and we're working really hard to get that thing through. It'll provide fairness, equity, and understandability for taxpayers, and I really hope we can get that to the finish line. And the last thing I'm following really closely is the pension conversation. I think, as everybody probably on this Zoom call knows, I've been pretty outspoken about the state's responsibility as far as pensions are concerned. And I was very critical of the plan that came out of government operations last year, which basically eviscerated and obliterated our people that are in the pension system and the benefits that they were expecting. And I was very happy to see that the task force that met over the summer came up with a far, far more reasonable approach to this situation. I'll save the bulk of my time for questions.
Thank you, Scott. So next we have Scott Campbell and then Marty Feltus.
Thank you, Laurel. Representative Sims, Catherine has just indicated to me that she's got to leave to take her kids to daycare. So if it's okay with everyone, I'd like to let Catherine go first and then I'll go after.
Sure.
Thank you so much. Juggling all the many hats that I wear and got a 2 and 4-year-old to get to daycare so I can get back for my next meeting. So really appreciate the opportunity to jump the line here. So I'm Representative Catherine Sims. I live in Craftsbury and serve with Vicky, Representative Strong, in a 2-member district serving Albany, Barton, Craftsbury, Greensboro, Glover, Sheffield, and Wheelock. And I serve on energy and technology. And there are just a couple of things that I want to highlight for my time together with you all. Along with a couple of other folks in this group, I'm proud to be a member of the Rural Caucus, a tripartisan group of legislators who this year worked to introduce our first ever rural Omnibus Bill, which was designed to specifically address some of the longstanding challenges that our small rural communities face. A bulk of that came from work that we did this summer out and about visiting every corner of the state, hearing from loggers and landowners and sawmill operators and firewood producers, all folks connected to the forest economy about what's working, what are the gaps, and what are the challenges that we can do to ensure that we have a vibrant forest economy that supports the forests and all the benefits that they provide to our state. And so really excited to have been a part of that work. And many of the pieces of that bill are moving forward right now. Another thing that I'd flag is that we are in the middle of redistricting. Every 10 years, when we have a census, we look at ensuring equal representation for Vermonters. And so the House has sent a draft map out to the local boards of civil authority, asking for feedback. There's a website designed for folks to send in written comment and testimony. Is being taken this week from Orleans, Caledonia, and Essex County. So folks have been following that and want to weigh in on the draft maps. It's invaluable to get your feedback on how the maps align with your sense of what's happening on the ground. And in my committee, I continue to advocate for universal access to affordable high-speed internet and cell phone service. This session will be focusing on ensuring that we have enough skilled workers able to physically lay that broadband fiber to reach all of our unserved and underserved areas. We have also started digging into the Climate Action Plan and taking up a number of recommendations relevant to our committee, including a program to help support municipal buildings get off fossil fuels, be more efficient in their buildings, and save taxpayer dollars. We are also looking at a clean heat standard, which would help Vermonters address the thermal load and live in more comfortable homes that use less money and reduce our carbon emissions. So excited to be digging into that work and making sure that our rural voices aren't left behind as we tackle climate change. And lastly, I just flag for anyone who's particularly interested in connecting with me, I hold office hours the second Sunday of every month. You can find out more on my website, catherinesimsforhouse.com, and connect with me and bring your questions and dig into some of these important conversations. So I'll end there and pass the torch back to Representative Campbell. And thanks again for accommodating my crazy morning schedule.
All right, am I up? I didn't hear you, Laurel. So, but anyway.
Yep, you're on. Yep.
Okay.
We hear you, Scott.
Good morning, everyone. I guess I'll just start by saying this term I sit on House Corrections and Institutions, which is unique as both a policy committee with oversight of corrections and a money committee responsible for all capital spending. Transportation also deals with policy and money, but only in the realm of transportation. And appropriations is strictly a money committee. I want to go into a little more detail about institutions and capital spending. Capital spending is also unusual in that it's a 2-year appropriation. Others are year by year. The capital bill appropriates money approved for bond issuance. So that amount is determined by what's called the Capital Debt Affordability Advisory Committee, which is an 8-member group that includes the treasurer, state auditor, head of the Vermont Bond Bank, legislative economist, secretary of administration, and some outside appointees. We're in the middle now of a 2-year capital bill, which authorized $123 million in new bond issuance. This supports ongoing investments in the state's facilities and long-term efforts, facilities, buildings primarily. Right now, that includes finally building a secure residential mental health facility to replace the Waterbury facility that was flooded out by Irene in 2011. And since then, the secure residential facility has been in temporary trailers, basically, in Middlesex, next to the police barracks there. This money also includes replacing other outdated facilities, such as a new public safety building in Williston, planning and pre-design for a new women's correctional facility, which is long overdue, investments in state colleges, forest, parks and recreation, water quality improvements, and a lot more. Both capital and appropriations do a mid-cycle true-up known as budget adjustment that Jane and Joe referenced. The huge influx of federal money is facilitating further investments in things like HVAC improvements in public buildings statewide. It's also allowing us to retire some old debt, and as well as providing unprecedented sums to housing, broadband, and climate initiatives, among other things. On the corrections side, longstanding challenges in the Department of Corrections have really ramped up during this pandemic. Staffing is at a crisis point, and the staff, they work double shifts and sleep in their cars, and it's really a difficult situation. Dysfunction at the women's facility in South Burlington led to the resignation of the DOC commissioner 2 years ago. Jim Baker led the department capably as an interim commissioner until recently. Now we have a new person, a new commissioner, a man named NEK, who seems attuned to the issues that he's facing. Corrections generally is shifting away from a purely punitive incarceration model to a rehabilitative model that recognizes that most inmates will be released back into the community. Our focus ought to be on preparing them and supporting them to be successful, both because it's the right thing to do and because it's far less expensive than reincarcerating them if they reoffend. Corrections and institutions intersect in facilities, which is why they were put together something like 25 years ago on the House side. Facility design both reflects correctional philosophy at the time of construction and dictates programming options for decades. So it's really important that the two work together. And that's the rationale for putting them together 25 years ago. Anyway, much of this is new ground for me. I bring some useful construction expertise on the building side, but I have a lot to learn on the other matters in capital budgeting and corrections policy. But I look forward to continuing to make a contribution there. Thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to serve.
Thank you, Scott. So Marty Feltus up next, and then Vicki Strong.
Good morning. I'm Marty Feltus, and I represent Sutton, Linden, and Burke, and I serve on the House Appropriations Committee. So I have comments very similar to what Senator Kitchell mentioned. She serves on the Senate Appropriations Committee. We both work on the budget as it comes from the governor. It goes to the House first, and we put together a package making adjustments to what the governor suggested. And then the Senate does the same thing. And then in the end, we all get together and hopefully come up with something that everybody can agree on. But certainly I agree with Jane's comments that we need to be very careful about what is our base spending level and what is our one-time spending level. Our current budgets are about $7.5 billion. And when all of this federal money disappears, we will be losing at least $500 million and perhaps more. So we need to make sure that that extra billion that we're spending over these last 2 years, last year and this year, and some into beyond, goes indeed for just one-time things that we think will really make a big difference in the state economy and welfare. And those are examples, I'm sure you've heard, are a lot of economic development issues, a lot of work on water and wastewater, big infrastructure projects, and continuing our work on clean water that need to be done. A lot of emphasis on broadband, cell service, a lot of emphasis on housing, and a lot of emphasis on what we can do to promote a better climate for us all. Those are all things that cost a lot of money and that we're not able to put huge amounts in every year in our annual budget. So using this bonus of federal money, we're hoping to get a jump on some of those areas. But in terms of the base budget, we need to be careful that that stays stable, that our incomes stay stable. And the question of some tax cuts that Jane mentioned and Scott mentioned as well need to be considered, because indeed, if all of those were enacted, we could reduce our base income by $40 to $50 million. So we need to make sure that those are valuable and those are useful and those will fit in with the state economy. So I just wanted to comment on those areas. My particular responsibilities in reviewing the budget are the information technology projects that our state is doing, water systems, wastewater budgeting that we're doing in those particular areas, and energy issues and the broadband issues are topics that are of interest in the committees I cover, and I work on those portions of the budget. I do want to comment, there will be 2 public hearings on the budget that we're considering now, one on February 8th in the evening and one on February 9th during the day. And those I'm sure will be mentioned in the newspaper. So if people, there will be a Zoom meeting, of course, but if people would like to attend those hearings, make a comment regarding the budget as it is set now, or proposals for where money should be spent. That's all the reason for those hearings. So we would love to have you participate if you're interested. Thanks.
Thank you, Marty. So Vicki Strong and then Terry Williams.
Thank you. Good morning. And thank you, Laurel and Darcy. And Laurel, congratulations on your retirement. You worked many faithful years at NBRH. They were blessed to have you. And I can see you're still staying busy, so you won't have any grass growing under your feet. But thank you so much. I serve on agriculture and forestry. This is my 4th year there. I've served previously on healthcare, judiciary, general housing, and military affairs. And I truly love the committee I serve on. And we do work hard to take testimony from the Agency of Agriculture and Forest Parks and Recreation in the early part of every session. And that's what we're in the middle of now. We are looking at the bill that the Rural Caucus put forth through the efforts of Representative Sims. And that's called, the number's H566. And it will be worked on pretty heavily. And the Omnibus bill that has also been proposed needs to work in connection with it to really see a difference in the forest industry. And they're begging for help, and their pleas are heard. So we pray and hope and work toward helping that industry that's been struggling, as well as dairy in our state. I want to address just a couple quick things that are besides my committee work. And one is a bill that's in Ed H608, which is a homeschooling bill. And I'm mentioning it because there was such a lot of, I don't want to say the word pushback necessarily, but concern about the bill. The intent of the bill from the administration is to fine-tune homeschooling, the process that homeschoolers go through, to let the state know that they're homeschooling, and to get a portfolio is what has often been used to be looked at and assessed every year. So the bill was throwing them a little bit for a loop, and we're working on an amendment for it. There's a lot of belief that that bill won't go forward anyway, but should it go forward, I just want folks out there who homeschool to know that we are working on that and that we will make that bill better. One more thing I wanted to touch on, well, actually I have 2 quick things. Mental health, I appreciate Representative Campbell bringing that up, that he mentioned it, what they're doing in their committee. And one thing for the Northeast Kingdom is to have a facility here in our area that will address the immediate needs of people who are having a mental health crisis, often suicidal. And I'm speaking from a personal experience point of view, and I see Representative Campbell nodding. He knows, and so does Representative Kitchell, knows, and anyone who served as long as we have, this is my 12th year, knows the seriousness of the Northeast Kingdom. When someone's in a mental health crisis, they're ending up in an emergency room, and that is taxing, very taxing to families, to the hospital facility, nurses and doctors. And we're hoping now with the work of the new director of NEK Human Services, Kelsey is planning a Zoom, I think, for next Monday. I just want to put out that to the legislators who are here to try to join that conversation. We really want to see a type of facility, basically a home, a place where it can be 24/7 for folks in this kind of crisis. There's a young woman that I knew personally very well since childhood who struggled most of her life with mental health issues in and out of different facilities, all the way down in Brattleboro to up in this area where often in the emergency room. And in the end, she didn't have her needs met. It was complicated, but she ended up taking her own life in a parking lot in Walmart just a few months ago. And that was very troubling and sad. And so that's part of my passion right now is that need. And that's just one instance of several that I'm aware of. So I'm hoping we can work together to make a difference there, financing it, et cetera. It will be a big lift, but we can do it. And then just briefly, I'll mention that for Proposition 5 coming up this week, I believe on Thursday for a vote, I'm sure it's no surprise. I'm very pro-life, but this proposition to put it on the ballot in November for the voters, there's a lot to it. And really, we're looking at then putting in the Vermont Constitution unlimited, unregulated abortion or other what may be termed reproductive rights that we have yet to determine, and courts will have to take upon themselves to determine. And so when Senator Benning mentioned in his time of visiting with us here and sharing with us that there's just times in history or times in our political atmosphere that something seems appropriate and something doesn't. In my mind, this doesn't feel appropriate for this time in our nation's history. So I will be voting no. It's a sad thing and it's a tough thing. And all of us have different thoughts and feelings about it, but it really does make me somber and actually fills my heart with pain. So anyway, I'm going to end there and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Representative Strong. So Terry Williams up next.
Good morning. Yes, I'm Terry Williams. I live in the sunny town of Granby, Vermont. I represent Granby, Victory, Concord, Lunenburg, Guildhall, Maidstone, and Brunswick, and of course, the Northeast Kingdom as a whole. If you're not aware, I'm on the Education Committee. We have been busy taking testimony from department heads, from the supervisory, principal, special education, career and technology, Vermont State Colleges, adult learning, Northeast Kingdom Learning Services, homeschoolers, and Secretary French, to name a few. Not surprising, what they are saying is all across the board, there are staff shortages, burnouts, attendance issues. They had hoped they could start the school year in a recovery mode, but had to revert back to the survival mode. In many areas where attendance equals revenue, there are many financial struggles. Federal dollars aren't necessarily available. They're coming to us to help them stay afloat. Committee topics include e-finance, which is a business software program implemented to create a universal chart of accounts so that we can merge all school district statistics into one report. There have been major struggles with making it work to the needs of the school business managers, so we are taking a hard look at our options moving forward. Another topic is pupil weighting, in which we are working to equitably balance education dollars across the state. There was a very intense study group put together that met many times throughout the summer and fall to work on this. As Representative Beck mentioned, he was part of this group, and he would be your best resource if you have questions. Act 173, which is a transition to a census block special education funding model, is another topic. This will affect school budgets across the state, as well as the pupil weighting. Some are ready, others who have had to spend much of their time and resources dealing with above-mentioned difficulties are not ready. So the question is, do we delay Act 173 or move it forward? COVID has had a tremendous impact, as you know, on all reaches of the educational system. It is going to take a long time to recover from this. Our children are resilient, but they are paying a big price in school absences and getting lost through the cracks, disrupted extracurricular activities, friendships. I encourage us all to keep positive attitudes and understanding hearts and helping hands for the sake of our children and our young adults. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I don't see any questions in the chat yet. So we've got plenty of time. So is there any one of our legislators who maybe didn't have quite enough chance to say everything you wanted to say? Would you like do you have anything to add this morning? Jane, go ahead.
Okay. Well, comment was made about the rural economy, and that's something that, in fact, a number of us who have been in the legislature have been focused on for quite a while. There was a round of legislative actions to address the forestry plight. Right now, there's a bill and to keep the Rygate the Rygate power plant going, because that's a major market for low-grade wood. And but I also one thing that we are going to be putting into the budget adjustment, and hopefully the House will concur, is premium assistance for small dairy farmers, or for dairy farmers up to a maximum of 5 million pounds of milk produced. So we know the cost of feed has gone up tremendously. The number of farms have been going out. And if any part of our economy and defining our rural landscape, it's certainly our dairy farms. And so I just wanted to bring that up as something that we are putting in. We found out that this could really benefit our dairy sector. And so that is something that emerged recently. And I just wanted to let people know that that's something that we will be proposing.
Thank you, Jane. And then Scott Beck, did you have your hand up?
Well, I did. I was very, very brief so we could get to questions as quick as possible. So let me just expand on one thing that I touched on, which was tax cuts. So in the general fund, for the most part, the legislature and the administration have agreed that there's about $50 million in tax cuts there that won't hurt the future base. And there's an ongoing conversation about how to target those tax cuts. And I think they will be targeted. I don't think it'll be broad-based that everybody will see tax cuts. There are ideas about children, about seniors, earned income tax credit. So we'll see where that conversation goes. The larger amount, which I think is $95.7 million, is over in the education fund. And there's a conversation about what to do with that money. It could be given back to taxpayers, but that would be a one-time tax cut. And then they'd be right back to their tax rate they were before. We're not sure taxpayers are really enthusiastic about having their taxes lowered one year, only to have them increased the next year. So there's conversation about maybe just sending that out as a separate check. There's also conversation about not sending it at all, and instead addressing some other really big needs around the state, which of course are school construction costs, which haven't been funded by the legislature in approaching 15 years. So that's an ongoing conversation. The good news is that we expect tax rates for education to be down across the state. Doesn't mean tax bills will be down. The tax rates will be down because the economy's been so hot and the consumption taxes have been coming in really, really strong, and the prices of houses and other properties have been going up. So that will allow a tax rate decrease, but it won't be a tax decrease.
Laurel, could I just expand a little bit on Representative Beck?
Sure.
Okay. Certainly everybody focuses on property taxes because that's the bill that they get in the mail. But a couple of years ago, we changed how we funded the education fund. And so property taxes are part of that. But all this, and that's why the consumption and all the money coming in has had such an impact on the education fund as well, because consumption has been an area that has really grown. So all the sales tax revenue go into the ed fund to support public education. All the proceeds, the profits from the lottery go in. 25% of the rooms and meals revenue go in. So I just want to bring that up. Oh, and a third of a purchase and use for when you purchase an automobile, the tax on that also goes into the ed fund. And so I just want to use this as an opportunity because I think many people just think of the ed fund and property taxes, but there are significant other revenue streams that flow into that fund that are dedicated to support the K through 12 systems. So certainly you can see if the higher revenues, and they're going to be time limited, as Representative Beck said, you can really just have some real swings up and down simply because of the impact of what those federal dollars have had on consumption patterns and the revenues that are generated, specifically the sales tax that now all of it is directed to support education. So I just thought I would use that as an opportunity to add a little bit of information about the revenues that are now dedicated to education.
Okay, thank you. So we do have a couple of questions in the chat. Oh, Joe, did you have something to add on that topic?
Not on that topic, Laurel.
Okay. Can I go to the questions then?
Sure, go right
Okay.
ahead.
So we have a question from Don Smith first, and it is there an effort in the legislature to preserve the Green Mountain Forest? Who would like to take that? Go ahead, Vicki.
Well, excuse me, I thought I'd jump in mostly because I'm on the forestry committee and I'm sorry. We are listening to a lot of testimony from Forest Parks and Recreation, particularly Michael Snyder, who's the commissioner, who is incredibly knowledgeable. Any of you who have ever heard him speak, he's just a dynamo of love for the forests and the ability to manage the forests. And so what I just want to say is they are managing our Green Mountain forests in a way that produces good products out of it, but also is preserving it in general. So, and also dealing with carbon sequestration. So they're really aware of so many things, not only for the economy, but for preservation, for beauty. And if Don has other thoughts about what he means by preserving, I'd like to know. You could reach out to me personally if he wishes. But there's really a wonderful group of people who are really behind preserving our forests and also managing them well and using them in a profitable way in the sense of to help the industry, but also help growth. So let me know, Don, if you have other thoughts.
Thank you, Vicki. So back to taxes. We have a question from Michael Costa. The original pupil weighting study and the task force's final recommendation show that school districts with big swings in tax rates, both up and down. I think the legislature will be able to pass something and get the governor's signature that looks like the task force final recommendations, given that some towns may experience tax hikes.
I can probably address that one, Laurel. To answer the question directly, yes, I think we can. It's going to require a transition, which could be in the form of time. It could be in the form of dollars. Fortunately, we have dollars right now to help transition through this. It could be very, very good chance it could be a complete change in how education taxes are paid from the citizen level. And what I mean by that is switching from a property tax where 70% of us don't even really pay on property to an income tax. That could happen as well. So I think, I think something's going to move, and I think it's going to be significant. I think you're going to see it'll be big, because this is not something that people take a crack at every couple of years. This is like a once every 20 to 25 year deal. And so if we're going to do it, we're going to have to do it big.
Okay, Joe, did you have something to say?
I did. And first off, Laurel, I have to congratulate you for having the courage to ask a group of legislators if they had anything more to add, because they all will take advantage of it. We didn't touch on the court system. The judicial branch of government is on virtual shutdown right now. And although there are little pockets of places where things are trying to happen, the upshot is we have a couple of things going on that people should be aware of. First and foremost, right now, the buildings all around the state, folks are trying to match them to what the reality is of COVID right now. Secondly, the security in all of the buildings is on short staff, and I mean that in a serious way. We have the Supreme Court literally shut down because the folks who are normally security there are going elsewhere to help out in other courthouses around the state. And this is a serious thing. I know that virtually our entire workforce is short-staffed, no matter what profession you happen to be in. But when the judicial branch of government is shut down as a result of this, that's something that really seriously has to be paid attention to. And finally, here in the kingdom, you should know that the Orleans County courthouses are not functioning any longer in a way that the judicial branch of government can operate in them. And so the decision has been made to build anew. And we are in the process of locating a plot of land, and then we'll build a brand new courthouse, which will also occupy spaces by the state's attorney's office and probation and parole. Over in Guildhall, on the other hand, I want to thank Representative Williams for joining me on a very cold day to meet with engineers who are coming over to make bids on an HVAC system, which is an air handling system for those that don't know what that acronym might mean, in order to bring fresh air into the building. Caledonia Courthouse, thankfully, has a good air handling system. What we are lacking right now is, in my eyes, courage to proceed with our normal trial systems in a time where COVID really has everybody on edge, and trying to deal with that has been very difficult. So thanks again.
In case you haven't been looking in the chat, Michael Costa also wanted to thank everybody for your focus on the healthcare workforce. Much appreciated. I don't have any other questions in the chat. Any final thoughts today?
Well, I'll kick in and just say, Laurel, to you and to Darcy, thank you very much for trying to put this on. This is our first virtual breakfast, and it's not an easy thing to do, as we legislators have all found out. And you guys deserve credit for putting this together today. Thanks.
Thank you to all of you. It's very important that we have a chance. It's what's so nice about Vermont and the Northeast Kingdom, that we have a chance to have face-to-face, even if it's on camera, with our legislators. I just want to remind you that these are the dates for the upcoming meetings, February 28th, March 28th, April 25th, and May 23rd. As I mentioned, most likely February will be on Zoom again, but hopefully things will look better 2 full years into the pandemic, and maybe we can meet in person in March. Darcy, do you want to have a few final words?
I just want to thank everybody. I was admitting to Laurel that I was a little bit nervous about doing these. I having done these for a couple of decades, actually, and get onto a Zoom format. We've all been on a million meetings, but it really worked out well. And I thank you, all of you legislators for doing all the great work that you're doing and representing us over there in Montpelier. I see Jane has something she'd like to say.
Just a question, Darcy. I was just wondering, do you have a number of people in the area who are listening virtually, participating? One of the things we've discovered is that although we aren't meeting in person, our technology actually has provided much greater access, particularly if you live in Bennington or Brattleboro. To come to the State House is a lot of time and effort. And so we know from feedback immediately that, you know, there are times when we have several hundred people listening to our committee deliberations. So I was just wondering, do you have an idea of what the interest was this morning? Because we can't look out and like we would if we were at the St. J House.
We had about 30 participants on, including all of you. In addition, we're going to put it on our Facebook as a post as soon as we get it uploaded to the cloud. And additionally, some of you may have seen Kingdom Access Television is up there as well. So they're going to be posting it and airing it on theirs. And we're going to be doing a Facebook post just to remind people. We're going to be telling the folks, all of you that were here, and really continue to get this going so it's successful, so we can get out there. Because there's 4,000 people alone on our Facebook posts. So that's a great question, and we want to get it out beyond just the folks that are watching here today. Great question. If I could just say one more thing, this is the first time I've really been able to say in public of just how much I've appreciated all of your support following the passing of my coworker, Jen Garand. As many of you know, she was at our legislative breakfast, and she was really the heart and soul of the chamber. And we lost her last year to pancreatic cancer during, the pandemic. And it's been a tough go this last year, I won't lie, but I can't tell you how wonderful it is to get some of these normal events that we're doing, getting back to getting back to normal in some semblance. And thank you for all your love, support out there, everybody. It really has been appreciated.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you. Bye.